The bag never left his side anymore, like the camera had fused with his routine. Another man, with the exact same name as his uncle, same age, same face, had just gotten married in Busan. On the same day. That was 27 minutes in the future. Min-jae panicked. He grabbed his phone, called Soo-young, and told her everything. She told him to lock the doors, stay inside, and burn the photo. He agreed. But just before midnight, something made him look out the window. And what he saw nearly made him vomit. The alley was empty. But the shadows weren't right. They were watching him. Min-jae refused to sleep. At 1 a.m., he destroyed the negative from the alley photo. He tore it apart, lit it in the sink, flushed the ashes. But the photo reappeared the next morning, undeveloped, sitting inside the Canon's film roll chamber. Opened November 3, 1997. 2 years before Min-jae met Soo-young. Out of options, Min-jae tracked down an old analog film developer who worked near Mapo, a retired man named Mr. Hyun who specialized in forensic photography for police in the 1980s. He brought the camera and a stack of the most disturbing prints. Mr. Hyun looked them over silent. His hands trembled when he picked up the one of the funeral-turned-wedding. Then he said, "You've taken a Bansu-sajin, a disruption photo." Min-jae asked what that meant, and vanished. 2 weeks passed. Neighbors complained about the smell. Police forced entry. The apartment was empty. No signs of struggle. No note. Nothing missing. Except one thing. The camera. Gone. But the film roll was still there, undeveloped. Curious, the police sent it to a lab in Seoul. And standing beside the bed, in the shadows? A girl. Wearing a funeral dress. Holding the camera. In 2011, a different man bought a dusty Canon AE1 from an antique market in Busan. The vendor claimed it was broken. Inside the case was a faded note. "Never look into the lens. Never shoot indoors. And never, ever, develop the last photo." The man smiled. He thought it was just a ghost story. So he looked into the lens and smiled. "The only thing that ever worked is taking the final photo of yourself. But it must be the very last. And no one must ever develop it." The shadow that traveled without a person. Sometimes, the first thing to go missing is your shadow. On a cold August morning in 2006, a 47-year-old fisherman named Warren Maitnall left his small home near Lake Taupo in the central North Island of New Zealand. He was known in his town of Turangi as quiet, dependable, and someone who never missed his morning catch. That day, he set out around 4:30 a.m., dragging his boat behind his aging 4x4. It was foggy. Almost unnaturally so. By 8 a.m., another fisherman, George, Warren's longtime rival and occasional drinking buddy, pulled up beside the lakeside and noticed something strange. Warren's truck was there. His boat was half-launched in the water. But Warren, gone. No tackle box, no rod set up. No footprints on the damp ground. Just one thing out of place. A shadow. Not his. Just a long, thin, human-like silhouette stretched across the rocks, with nothing to cast it. George called the police. They searched the area, assuming Warren may have fallen into the lake. Divers spent 2 days scouring the bottom. Nothing. No body. No gear. No logical explanation. Except one bizarre report from a teenage camper half a kilometer away, who told officers she saw a shadow walking by itself, like it didn't know it shouldn't be alone. They dismissed it. But Warren's family never found peace. And his case remains open. 2 months after Warren Maitnall vanished, in October 2006, a primary school teacher named Eliza Rowe arrived early to open up her classroom at a rural school in nearby Olakun. She was 32, recently divorced, known for being no-nonsense, the kind of teacher who scared you into being better. That morning, the janitor, Kevin, noticed her car already in the lot by 6:15 a.m., earlier than usual. But when he went to greet her in the hallway, she was just standing there, not moving, looking at her own reflection in the glass trophy cabinet. He asked if she was okay. She turned and asked a question he'd never forget. "Do you remember what I look like?" He thought she was joking, but she wasn't smiling. She seemed terrified. She said she'd looked in the mirror that morning and couldn't recognize her own face, that her reflection had shifted just slightly. And the most terrifying detail? Her shadow had stayed behind in the mirror. It hadn't followed her when she turned. Kevin laughed nervously. Eliza didn't. She left early that day and never came back. 2 weeks later, she was reported missing after her ex-husband came by her flat and found dinner on the stove, keys in the door, and no one home. Except in the reflection of the living room window? A shadow. Standing. Watching. But no one on the inside. Investigators searched Eliza's home. Nothing was stolen. No signs of struggle. But her bedroom had been covered, absolutely blanketed, in hand-drawn outlines of her own shadow. Hundreds of them. On paper. On the walls. Even on the ceiling. Each one had a different date underneath. The final one? October 22nd, the day before she vanished. And beneath it, one phrase scrawled over and over. "It left first. Then it came back alone." The school where she worked closed temporarily. A few weeks later, a substitute teacher arrived to clean out the old room. She noticed something odd in the corner of the classroom. A long vertical mirror leaned against the wall. She swore it hadn't been there before. She walked past it. Her reflection followed. But her shadow didn't. By late November 2006, whispers about the walking shadow had spread through small towns in central New Zealand. Most dismissed it as urban legend, something kids dared each other to talk about at sleepovers. But then came the incident on State Highway 1, just outside Taihape. A long-haul truck driver named Russell Beck was making a late-night delivery. Around 2:40 a.m., deep in the middle of nowhere, he spotted what he assumed was a pedestrian walking along the side of the road. Russell slowed down to offer help. It was unusual to see anyone out here at that hour. But when his headlights hit the figure, he froze. The man was tall, wearing a coat, but his feet didn't touch the ground. He was hovering, just inches off the pavement, and swaying gently, as if blown by wind that wasn't there. And his shadow? It was walking ahead of him, not behind. Like it had its own destination. Russell honked. No response. He passed the figure, sweating. But when he checked his rearview mirror, the shadow had turned around. But the man hadn't. 3 days later, a young couple named Hannah and Thomas were hiking the Tongariro crossing when they found a Polaroid camera half buried near a rest hut. It still had one undeveloped shot inside. Out of curiosity, they snapped a photo of themselves with the mountains behind them. Later that night, back at their lodge, the photo developed, but only Hannah appeared in the image. Thomas was missing entirely. Even his shadow wasn't there. Hannah laughed nervously. Maybe it was a glitch? But 2 days later, Thomas disappeared. "I thought your office said next week." But Lynette checked her notes. "No, today." She asked if Isaac was home. The aunt frowned. "Isaac's been gone for 6 weeks." Lynette, confused, stepped inside and stopped dead in her tracks. The aunt screamed. Isaac blinked once and disappeared. Word about the strange disappearances was quietly traveling among local law enforcement, unofficially, of course. No 1/20th, A power company employee named Jonas Fielding was sent to investigate a series of energy blackouts affecting a rural stretch near the Kaingaroa forest. But she didn't. She tracked down a man referred to in whispers across the Bay of Plenty. Makir Tuartoa, a reclusive former cultural anthropologist and Maori spiritual advisor, now living in isolation. When she arrived at his hut, the villa was famous for one thing: 360 degrees of glass walls. Every angle offered a reflection day and night. Leonard was a tech consultant on vacation, staying alone, hoping to escape work stress. The first night went fine. The next morning, the cleaning staff entered the villa and found it spotless, bags still packed, passport untouched. But no Leonard. Except on the bathroom mirror was a smudge of breath, and a single fingerprint on the glass, from the inside. New Year's Eve, 2006. Dozens gathered at Mount Cook for a winter camping celebration under the full moon. Among them, a group of university students with cameras and telescopes. And then a second. And a third. They moved in perfect silence, with no source, across the snow. In the morning, the students. But Luca began acting differently. He stood outside at dusk, watching the ground. He whispered to corners. And he began drawing the same thing over and over. A long shadow, taller than any human, leading into a black doorway in the earth. The last page had one sentence: "My shadow knows the way home." He was never seen again. Detective Amara Nathai resigned from the force the next week. She left behind a folder titled "Shadow Cases, Unexplained." Inside were 18 separate files, each one tied to a person who vanished without a trace, but always with one common thread: a missing, misplaced, or misbehaving shadow. It looked like it was smiling. And in the middle of the living room, one small slip of paper. It read, "They arrive before you. They stay after. And sometimes, they go in your place." In 2019, a group of campers outside Nelson, New Zealand, submitted a photo to a paranormal subreddit. It showed their shadows at sunset. All 5 friends. Normal. Except, there were 6 shadows. And the 6th? It was waving. The house that wouldn't let you leave. Some houses don't need a lock to keep you in. They just don't let you go. In the spring of 1974, a young couple, Peter and Marlene Brewer, both 29, left their tiny Pittsburgh apartment to pursue a quieter life in the countryside of western Pennsylvania. Peter was a mechanic. Marlene, a part-time librarian. They had no kids, few friends, and a dream: restore a big, empty farmhouse and turn it into a bed and breakfast. They bought the property at an auction. No other bidders. A 3-story colonial-era home just outside Meadville, nestled in overgrown trees, purchased for $14,000. It was a steal, until the house started stealing from them. The first strange thing wasn't inside, it was the welcome mat. When they arrived on move-in day, they noticed a tattered mat at the front door that said, "You're already home." Neither of them had put it there. They assumed maybe a neighbor had left it. But there were no neighbors within a mile. Peter tossed it aside and unlocked the front door. It didn't creak. It sighed. The first week, they focused on cleaning. The inside of the house was dusty, but mostly untouched. Windows intact. Furniture from the 50s. Old wallpaper with faint floral patterns. Then Peter noticed something odd. The study, a small room with a fireplace and bay windows, seemed to be on the left side of the house when viewed from outside. But inside, it appeared on the right. He chalked it up to fatigue. Old homes were confusing. But when he walked around the outside of the house that evening, the bay windows weren't there anymore. In their place, a solid wall. He called Marlene. She thought he was joking. But when they walked around again together, they both saw the windows. And then they were gone. Peter joked. "Maybe the house is shy," Marlene replied. "Or maybe it moves when we're not looking." They laughed, but neither of them slept well that night. 10 days in, Peter tried to set up a landline. He called the phone company from a payphone in town and asked to activate the number assigned to their property. The operator paused, then said, "Sir, that address isn't in our records. Are you sure it exists?" Peter gave her coordinates. She said that parcel was marked non-residential condemned. He asked why. She replied, "It burned down in 1953. Peter froze. "That's impossible," he said. "I'm living in it." The operator apologized and offered to escalate the ticket. He never heard back. Back at home, the rotary phone on the wall began ringing every night at 2:17 a.m. No dial tone. No connection. Just one ring, followed by the sound of breathing. Peter disconnected the wires. It kept ringing anyway. On May 10th, about 2 weeks after moving in, Marlene decided to clean the guest room on the second floor, a cramped, square space with floral curtains and a single iron bed frame. She opened the door and immediately noticed something strange. The room was cold. Colder than the rest of the house, even though the heater had been running all morning. Still, she entered, dusted the windowsills, and swept the floor. The whole process took maybe 30 minutes. As she was leaving, she heard a soft click behind her. She turned. The door was shut. She hadn't closed it. She reached for the knob. It wouldn't turn. She called for Peter. No response. She tried again. Still stuck. Then the doorknob began to turn by itself, ever so slightly, not toward her, but away, like someone was locking it from the inside. But she was inside. Marlene backed away, panic growing. She pounded the door with her fists. It was Peter, finally answering from the hallway, who broke it open using a crowbar. When they looked at the old knob, Peter said, "This lock, it only works from the outside." Marlene whispered, "Then how did it lock me in?" 2 days later, Peter and Marlene decided they needed a break, a weekend away to clear their heads. They packed bags, locked up, and walked down the long gravel path toward their car. But when they reached it, it was gone. No tire marks. No broken glass. Just a circle of flattened grass where it had been. They both ran back to the house to call for help. Except, the front door was no longer where it used to be. They circled the entire house 3 times. No doors. No way in. Finally, on the 4th pass, Marlene screamed. The door was back, but now on the side of the house. No porch. Just a frame, hovering a few inches above the ground, like the house had turned to face a different direction entirely. Peter hesitated. Marlene whispered, "Don't go in." Peter opened it anyway. Inside, everything was normal. Except the kitchen clock was now stuck at 2:17, the exact time the phone always rang. That night, they made a plan, leave on foot. They didn't care if the car was gone. They would walk to the nearest town, get a hotel, and never come back. They waited until morning, packed light, left a note, and stepped out. As they reached the edge of the treeline, the sky changed. It turned gray, not cloudy, flat, artificial gray, like someone had lowered a ceiling. Marlene looked back. The house was closer than before, closer than possible. She hadn't heard footsteps, but somehow they were now only 20 feet from the front door again. Peter grabbed her hand and screamed, "Run!" They sprinted. And then the forest looped. They passed the same oak tree 3 times. Same broken fence. Same fallen log. Each time they ran, the house was a little closer. Peter stumbled backwards, shouting. Marlene ran in. The reflection was gone. But etched into the steam on the mirror, perfectly centered, was a single line. "He looks better in your skin." That afternoon, Peter searched the attic for tools, desperate to wedge. "The house is alive. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't move. But it watches. And it remembers. It feeds on decision. If you want to leave, it learns to stop you. Every time you plan an escape, it listens. At least, not yet." 2 nights later, Peter woke up to a hum. In early June, Marlene began keeping a journal. She logged every sound, every flicker of light, every door that moved on its own. But on June 12th, she noticed something stranger. "The hallway's shorter," she wrote. 7 steps from the den to the front door. It used to be 12. Peter measured the living room the next day. When it resumed, Marlene was asleep, and Peter's shadow, frozen on the far wall, was still blinking. Mile after mile. Then silence. Trees opened. And there it was again. The house. Same exact angle. Like it had followed them. Not fully formed. Just impressions. People made of shadow and static. Marlene screamed. Peter tried to run, but the front door had been replaced by another hallway. Each door in the house now opened into another part of the house. No exits. Marlene looked at him. "Do you think we were meant to come here?" Peter didn't answer, because just then the hallway ended. And the house? It wasn't there. Just an empty field. No ruins. No gravel. No chimney. Gone. Like it had never been built. Marlene never saw Peter again. She returned to Pittsburgh, moved in with H. No one questioned it. On move-in day, they found a welcome mat that read, "You're already home." And under the floorboards? A single, dust-covered photo. 2 people standing in front of the house. That night, at 2:17 a.m., the rotary phone rang. They didn't own a rotary phone. But they picked up, and from the other end came a whisper. "The house is awake again." Then, "Welcome back." The train tunnel that was never built. If no map says it's there, then why can you still hear the train? In late autumn of 1981, a 36-year-old Austrian man named Friedrich Seidel, an avid solo hiker and amateur historian, went missing while trekking in the Gosling Alps, about 100 kilometers southwest of Vienna. He had taken a week off from his job as a post office clerk in Linz to explore an old supply trail he believed connected 2 World War II-era outposts. He was well equipped, experienced, left detailed notes with his family, brought a map. He never came back. 5 days later, a local rescue team found his tent, fully intact, near the base of a ridge. Campfire cold. Food untouched. But no sign of Friedrich. Except one strange detail. On the back of his trail map, he had scribbled a single line. "I heard the train again. Same time. Same whistle. But there are no tracks here." They found no railway. No tracks. No evidence of a tunnel. But 3 months later, during spring thaw, a pair of hikers stumbled across something strange on the north slope of the ridge. A tunnel, carved into the limestone rock, arched like a rail entrance, lichen-covered, unmarked, and just outside it, a pair of footprints, leading in, but none leading out. The hikers, a married couple from Salzburg, initially thought the entrance was part of an old mining operation. But the structure didn't fit mining specs. It had no side rails, no mining cart grooves, no ventilation pipes. What it did have was this: a curved stone frame, smooth on both sides, and 3 strange vertical notches etched evenly along the top, like an archway meant to house signage that had long since vanished. And that's when they heard it. A train whistle. Faint. Distant. but unmistakable. It echoed from inside the tunnel, even though it appeared to be a shallow dead end just a few meters in. The couple didn't go in. They turned around and left, unsettled. When they told locals back in Gosling, most just laughed. "There's never been a tunnel there," one man said. "The nearest line is 20 kilometers south." But the couple took a photo. They gave it to the Alpine Geological Survey, who sent a field researcher named Elena Trapp to verify the structure. Elena, a 28-year-old geophysicist with a PhD from Innsbruck, was used to odd formations. But when she arrived, her GPS refused to lock. Her compass spun, and her radio picked up faint metallic noises, like hammering or steam. When she entered the tunnel, alone, she saw something no one expected. A second arch, 5 meters in, perfectly preserved, still intact. Behind it, absolute blackness. But when she turned off her flashlight, she saw lights. Soft yellow glow, like oil lamps, flickering in the distance. And then came the sound again. Metal screeching. A locomotive slowing down. She turned and ran. The report she filed would be the last ever written about that tunnel. 2 weeks later, the Geological Survey deemed the area unstable and sealed it off. But Elena wasn't done. Elena didn't believe in ghosts, or time slips, or anything supernatural. But something about the tunnel felt wrong in a scientific way. So she reached out to a contact at the Austrian Rail Historical Archives in Vienna, a reclusive map specialist named Rolf Meissner, who maintained private access to pre-war survey charts. Rolf agreed to help. He spent 3 days combing through rail development plans from 1900 to 1960. And he found something. A proposal, dated 1939, for a military rail extension running exactly through the Gosling Ridge. A tunnel. Short, straight, but never approved. The documents showed it had been marked for construction, then canceled within weeks. Stamped rejected by High Command. But Rolf noticed something even stranger. A follow-up note, handwritten, tucked into the folder. Work began. Ceased after first shift. All 5 men missing. Tunnel sealed. Order, erase route. There was no record of this order anywhere else. Elena visited the archives herself. Saw the documents. Took a photograph. That night, she received a phone call from an unlisted number. A man whispered, "You walked the wrong tracks. Don't return. It's not a tunnel. It's a loop." She moved out of Austria that week. But she never deleted the photo. Because in it, behind the edge of the rail map, barely visible, was a blurry silhouette, standing in the tunnel, looking at the camera. A year after Friedrich disappeared, his brother Thomas Seidel, a retired engineer, decided to visit the ridge. He wanted closure. Answers. Maybe just to leave a cross. But when he arrived at the slope, something stopped him in his tracks. There were fresh footprints, leading to the tunnel. It had been officially sealed, bricked over. But the bricks were cracked. Thomas camped overnight. At 3:47 a.m., he heard a train whistle. Then a rumbling. Then silence. He returned home. And 3 weeks later, a brown envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a train timetable dated 1981. One route was circled. Linz? Linz. No middle station. Just a time, 3:47 a.m. He took it to a transit historian who told him this. "That line never existed. But I've seen this format before, during the war. It's a loop test pattern used in phantom track simulations." Phantom tracks were wartime decoys, lines built to confuse spy planes. Except this one was never physically built. At least, not officially. Thomas became obsessed. He returned to the ridge every October. Same day, same hour. always heard the whistle, never saw the train. Until 1989. October 22, 1989. Tomas stood at the base of the ridge, holding a flashlight, a stopwatch, and the old 1981 timetable. At exactly 3:47 a.m., he felt the ground tremble. A bright headlight shone through the bricks. Then, slowly, without any sound of braking, the bricks dissolved into shadow. And the train appeared. It was not modern. It wasn't even post-war. It looked pre-1930s. Iron and steam. Oil lamps. Black paint with no markings. And in the windows? Faces. But every face was turned away from the window, like they were hiding or sleeping. The train slowed and stopped. A side door opened. No one stepped out. But on the ground in front of Tomas, now shaking, something appeared. A manifest. Dated October 22, 1981. Train 4471L. Departure Linz. Arrival. Passengers 5. They started looking for others, anyone who had reported phantom train sounds, unmarked tunnels, strange timetables. And they found them. 4 reports. 1 in Canada. 1 in Thailand. 1 in Morocco. 1 in Brazil. All eerily similar. Vanished hikers. Faint train whistles. Bricked-up arches. But in each case, no station. No destination. Just appearances and departures. Elena started to map them. She noticed something impossible. The locations formed a circle. Equidistant. A loop, just like the whisper said. And in the center of that loop, a rural stretch of ocean off the southern coast of Greenland. No land. But according to one classified Navy sonar scan, there's something metal down there. A bell-shaped object. Rusted. Hollow. Exactly the dimensions of an old train car. And every 7 years, it moves. The woman who died twice. You can only bury someone once. So why did her family have to do it twice? In the spring of 2002, in a remote barangay on the southern edge of Bohol Island, a 29-year-old mother named Ilona Reyes was pronounced dead after collapsing suddenly during a wedding celebration. She left behind a grieving husband, Marco, and a 6-year-old daughter, Reina. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest due to convulsions, possibly linked to epilepsy. But there was a problem. Ilona had never been diagnosed with epilepsy. In fact, she'd never had any serious health conditions at all. She'd been dancing, laughing, drinking a little coconut wine. And then, mid-sentence, she screamed, clutched her head, and dropped. The local doctor, Dr. Leandro Cruz, tried to resuscitate her. No pulse. No breathing. Pupils dilated. After 20 minutes, he signed the death certificate. That night, her body was cleaned and wrapped in traditional white cotton. Her family placed candles around her and held vigil for 3 days, as is custom. But then came the first strange thing. On the morning of the 3rd day, her daughter Reina, still too young to fully understand, wandered into the small nipa hut where Ilona's body had been laid in an open casket. She screamed. Marco ran in. What he saw froze him. Ilona's head was tilted to the side, in a way it hadn't been before. Her eyes were open, and there were scratch marks on the inside of the wooden casket lid. Panicked, the family demanded the body be exhumed and tested. But this was rural Bohol in 2002, no access to modern forensic tools. Instead, the barangay captain called for Dr. Cruz to return and explain himself. But Dr. Cruz never came back. His clinic was found abandoned 2 days later. No notes. No clothes. Just a set of burned files in the backyard pit. Police opened an investigation. Turns out, Dr. Cruz had previously lost his license in Manila for misdiagnosing a coma patient and had been practicing under a false name in Bohol, which meant Alona's death might not have been death at all. They reopened the coffin. The second doctor, a woman named Dr. Sari Mendoza, reported something chilling. Alona had no embalming fluid in her body, which was required by local law. No internal damage. And her tongue had been bitten halfway off, likely from seizure or screaming. Then came the real shock. Her blood was still warm. Alona's body was transported to Tagbilaran, the nearest city, for advanced testing. But the next morning, the morgue technician fainted after walking into the cold chamber, because the drawer where Alona's body had been placed was empty. 2 hours later, a nurse found Alona, alive, barefoot, and sitting cross-legged outside the hospital chapel. Her white burial dress was still on her. She was rocking back and forth, humming a lullaby. When staff approached her, she whispered, "You buried me in the wrong place." She was rushed to ICU. Vitals, stable. Brain scans, normal. No signs of oxygen deprivation. The doctors were stunned. When asked if she remembered what happened, she said, "I heard the music stop. I felt the dark. And then the scratching. So I screamed. I screamed until the wood cracked." For a while, it seemed like a miracle. The woman who died had come back. But that's when the dream started. Alona started waking up screaming every night. She described being in a room with no walls, filled with a drumming noise. She began sleepwalking. And each night, she was found closer to the cane field behind her house, where her late grandfather had died decades ago under mysterious circumstances. One night, Rena followed her outside. She found her mother kneeling in the cane field, whispering something in a language Rena didn't recognize. Something guttural, almost chanting. When Marco asked Alona about it, she said she didn't remember. But she began speaking of 2 lives, one of them not her own. She called herself Maria sometimes. Said she was waiting for the right body to wake up in. The priest was called. And after hearing Alona speak 3 languages she never learned, including Latin, he declared, "This is not resurrection. This is trespass." That's when things got worse. Neighbors began reporting hearing footsteps at night on their roofs. Animals started going missing, dogs, cats, even a young goat. All near the Reyes household. And then one morning, the town awoke to something horrific. The grave where Alona had first been buried, now empty, had resealed itself, as if the soil had grown over the coffin again. Marco, now terrified, demanded the grave be reopened. The coffin was still inside. But it wasn't empty. Inside was a copy of Alona's body. Same face. Same dress. Same scratch marks. But her eyes were open, and this one was smiling. It was later found near the coast, engine still running, doors wide open, driver unconscious. Inside the van? Nothing. Just scratch marks on the inside windows. The mayor, trying to calm growing public hysteria, issued an official statement. Time of death, 2002. Burial location, unknown. Medical examiner, Dr. Leandro Cruz. The same doctor who'd vanished. A local journalist named Eva Punzalan, working for a regional TV network, caught wind of the Alona story and began compiling witness interviews for a special report. She filmed over 12 hours of footage, including interviews with Marco, neighbors, and a security guard from the hospital who claimed he saw 2 Alonas entering the building on the night she returned from the dead. Eva backed up all footage onto 2 separate hard drives. The next morning, both drives were completely blank. No errors. No files. Just one strange file name. Maria_found_us.mp3. When she played the file, it was static. But deep in the background, for just 11 seconds, a woman's voice could be heard whispering. "She took the name, but I kept the heart." Eva quit the station the next day. She moved to Manila and became a school teacher. Was black, and one was white. She spoke less and less as the weeks passed, until finally, she stopped speaking altogether. A child psychologist from Cebu was brought in. He asked Reina to write instead. She drew a page filled with looping ovals, then wrote one line in perfect script. Marco, growing desperate, traveled to Siquijor Island, known locally for its faith healers and shamans, albularios. Lola didn't flinch. She simply said, "The soul can be borrowed, but only once, and only if it's not claimed." She prepared a ritual using ashes, coconut oil, and a cloth made of funeral linen. She answered, "I didn't wear one. I was naked in the jeepney." They laughed. For the first time in weeks, it felt like she was back. But just before sunrise, Alona woke up screaming. She said Maria was still inside her, watching, waiting for her to fall asleep again. For days later, Alona was found in her bed, dead. Her eyes were open, fixed, wide. She was buried the next day, again, under a new name, with both a Catholic rite and a spiritual sealing performed by Lola Deliang. The grave has never been reopened, and Reina never visits it. To this day, the town of Balili avoids the field behind the Reyes home. Grass doesn't grow there anymore. Just cane. She visited the hospital in Tagbilaran, requested access to the archive room, and signed the visitor log. She never came back out. When the janitor unlocked the door, it was empty. Except for one thing. A white funeral dress, folded neatly on the floor. Still warm. The village with no echoes. Based on fragments of folklore, an archived letter from a vanished audio researcher, and an unofficial investigation conducted by a foreign journalist who never returned. Sound always bounces back. But in this place, it just gets swallowed. In late October of 1995, a 32-year-old acoustic researcher from Oslo named Erik Madsen was sent on a short assignment to a village no one had heard of, literally. The assignment came from the Norwegian Institute of Acoustic Phenomena, a fringe but government-funded lab that studied anomalous frequencies in remote regions. The destination was a place called Kaldaland, which, in Norwegian, roughly means Cold Valley. It didn't appear on any modern maps. In fact, it was only mentioned once, in a single 1971 geological survey marked simply with the phrase, "Inhabitants unknown. Sound anomaly recorded. Further study not advised." Erik was intrigued. He was the kind of person who loved the unexplained. He'd once camped on top of an ice shelf for 3 days just to record glacial echoes. So a town where echoes didn't exist. That sounded like an adventure. He packed his gear, a field microphone, analog reel-to-reel recorder, a camcorder, and his notebook. He left Oslo by train, then rented a jeep in the town of Andelsens, where an elderly station clerk gave him directions the old way, drawn by hand, with warnings in the margins. "Don't go after sunset. Turn around if the trees stop swaying. Leave by the 3rd night. Never stay longer." Erik laughed, but he should have listened. Kaldaland was perched between 2 steep ridges, its cottages scattered like old bones across a frost-covered valley. There were no signs, no lights, and no sounds. Not even birdsong. When Erik arrived, he was surprised to find that people still lived there, about 20 or 30, maybe more, all dressed in layers of hand-stitched wool, speaking in a dialect he couldn't quite place. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. But they watched him. Constantly. Erik stayed at a small boarding house run by a woman named Marta, who didn't ask for payment. She simply said, "Record what you must, but only between dawn and dusk." He thought it was superstition. That first night, Eric walked into the field behind the village and tried a simple test, the clap echo. He clapped once. No echo. He clapped again. Louder. Still nothing. Then he yelled, "Hello?" No bounce. No return. No reverberation. It was as if the sound just dissolved. He checked his equipment. All normal. So he went back inside and wrote in his notebook, "Caldelan is acoustically dead." The next morning, Eric started experimenting. He played a tone through his speaker, 1000 hertz constant. In any other environment, this would bounce off surfaces and create a pattern. Here, the wave flattened instantly. No spike. No tail. Just gone. He walked through the village, testing different locations. At one point, he knocked on a wooden post. It made no sound. He even tried to record his own voice, saying his name over and over. But when he played it back, the tape was blank. No hiss. No ambient. Just silence. That night, Marta told him a story. "The valley is hollow," she whispered. "It was carved out by silence itself. The first people who came here, they called it the godless mouth, because once something enters it, it doesn't come back out." Eric asked what she meant. She said, "That includes voices. And sometimes people." On the second night, Eric placed a microphone in the center of the village, surrounded by homes, and left it recording overnight, hoping to capture ambient sounds, wind, animals, anything. In the morning, he played the tape back. At first, nothing. Then, a faint clicking. Almost mechanical. Then, a whisper. Eric turned up the volume. The voice on the tape said, "You shouldn't have brought sound here." And then, screaming. High-pitched. Metallic. Distorted, like it was coming through a radio underwater. The tape then melted inside the machine. The reels turned gummy. And red. Not metaphorically red, red. As if blood had somehow mixed with the magnetic tape. Eric fled the room. When he returned with Marta, the machine was gone. She said, "You have one more night. Then the valley takes your breath." On the final night, Eric stood on the edge of the frozen field where he'd first tested the echo. He hadn't planned to stay past sunset, but something kept him there. A feeling. A hum in his chest. That's when he heard it. Music. It was distant, soft, and hollow, like it was coming from beneath the ground. He turned on his recorder. The sound grew louder, an old Scandinavian lullaby. One he recognized from a cassette he'd owned as a child, but hadn't heard in over 20 years. No one was visible. The village was still. He followed the music through the trees, to a small chapel on a hill. Inside, there were no pews, no altar. Just a bare room and a single stone basin in the center, filled with melted snow. He looked down into the water. No reflection. Just dark, moving shapes. Then, a whisper from behind him. "You brought your voice here. Now it belongs to the valley." Eric turned. No one. The door slammed shut. Inside the chapel, Eric tried to shout, but no sound came out. Not even a cough. His throat tightened, as if air itself refused to move through it. He clawed at his neck, gasping silently. Then the stone basin began to ripple. A shape rose from the water, faceless, but vaguely human, and Eric heard a voice in his head, not with his ears. "You recorded us. Now we will record you." Eric collapsed. When he woke, it was morning. The chapel was gone. Just an open patch of frost. His gear? Melted. His notebook? Blank. And his voice? Gone. Eric somehow made it back to Andelsen's. But something was wrong. When he tried to speak, his voice came out backwards. Not metaphorically, literally reversed audio. He would say, "Hello," and it would sound like, "Allah." Doctors thought it was neurological, but brain scans were normal. Then, in the hospital, a nurse stepped into his room and whispered, "You've been to Caldelan." He nodded, terrified. She closed the door and locked it. Then she said, "They keep your echo there. You can never fully leave." And when she smiled, her mouth didn't move. Weeks later, a journalist named Tove Henningsen heard rumors about a man who'd returned from a silent village and couldn't speak right. She tracked down Eric, interviewed him on tape, and mailed the audio to her editor in Oslo. But the envelope arrived empty. Not opened. Not tampered with. Just blank. When she went back to Eric's hospital room, he was gone. The nurses claimed he'd been transferred. No records. No forwarding address. She searched for weeks. Then, one night, she received a voicemail. "He is in the valley again, but now he sings for them." The number was untraceable. The voice on the tape? It was her own. In the years since Eric's disappearance, multiple hikers and geologists have attempted to find Caldelan. All failed. GPS malfunctions. Compass needles spin. Birds won't fly overhead. But sometimes, if you're near Rama River on a windless night, you can hear something strange. No official records. No locals willing to talk. Just fragments, in tape hiss, in audio journals that erase themselves, and in one handwritten note, smuggled out by a terrified postman. There are no echoes in Caldelan, because nothing escapes the sound. Once a voice enters, it becomes part of the silence. The phone that called its owner's future. Some phones ring from the past. But what if one rang from the future, your future, and you were the one who picked up? In June of 2013, a 25-year-old freelance programmer named Lucas Andrade was living in a cramped apartment in Porto Alegre, Brazil. He was introverted, a bit of a recluse, and spent most of his time coding late into the night, listening to lo-fi music, and drinking way too much strong black coffee. One day, after a long 72-hour coding sprint for a startup that would never pay him, Lucas stepped outside to get fresh air. It was just before sunset. He walked to a nearby flea market, Feira de Tradição, a place known for dusty antiques and weird electronics. Lucas loved retro tech. So when he saw an old black Motorola Razr flip phone, in pristine condition, sitting on a vendor's blanket, he felt that weird rush of nostalgia. It looked almost new, battery intact, no scratches, the faint Motorola logo shining like a ghost from the past. The vendor, an older man with cloudy eyes, said it had no SIM card and claimed it didn't belong to anyone anymore. Lucas laughed and bought it for 15 reais. He didn't expect it to turn on. But that night, at 2:33 a.m., it did. All by itself. Lucas was asleep when the phone rang. But it wasn't a ringtone. It was static. And the screen, which shouldn't have worked at all, lit up with a number. +550000002039. He didn't recognize the area code. 00 isn't assigned to any Brazilian state. And 2039 isn't a real number either. It looked fake. But the call wouldn't stop. It kept ringing, longer than any normal call, a full 2 minutes. Eventually, Lucas gave in and answered. There was silence. Then, a distorted voice. Robotic. Almost like his own. It said, "Lucas, don't take the red bus tomorrow. 7:40 a.m. route. It doesn't arrive." Then the call ended. He stared at the phone. There was no call history. He thought it was a prank, some kind of AI joke. But something in the voice, the mechanical rasp, it chilled him. The next morning, curiosity got the best of him. So Lucas didn't take the 7:40 red bus. And at 7:43 a.m., he saw the news. Breaking! Route 14 bus explodes after brake failure. Casualties confirmed. It was the same bus. Same line. Same time. Lucas should have been on it. Lucas kept the phone charged now, afraid to turn it off. It stayed quiet for 3 days. Then came a text message. Rua Santana, Corner Store, 9:12 p.m. Don't let her go. He stared at the screen. There was no sender name. Just the same ghost number. +550000002039. That night, he walked to Rua Santana out of sheer paranoia. At 9:09 p.m., he saw a woman drop her groceries near the curb. A bus was coming fast. People kept walking. But Lucas rushed forward, pulled her back, just as the bus jumped the sidewalk, crushing the fruit stand behind her. Her name was Anna Vittoria. They went for coffee. 1 month later, they were dating. Lucas tried to explain the phone once. She laughed, said maybe it was his guardian angel. But Lucas had already noticed something else. The messages were getting more personal, and they always knew where he would be. By September, the phone was no longer just warning him. It was predicting events. Earthquake in Chile, warned 48 hours prior. Job offer from a U.S. firm, appeared in a text 10 minutes before his inbox dinged. Even the exact words Anna would say during a fight, hours before it happened. Then came the recording. One night, the phone buzzed once and played a voicemail. It was his own voice. Clear. Panicked. Anna is gone. I saw her fall. It's my fault. Don't let her get on the elevator. Whatever you do. Then static. Lucas stared at the screen. There was no timestamp. No way to call back. He told Anna. Begged her to take the stairs from now on. She agreed. But 3 weeks later, Lucas received another message. You can't stop all endings. She still rides alone. 18th floor. 10:16 p.m. He ran home from work that night. Sprinting. Got to their building at 10:15. But he was too late. The power had surged. The elevator had stalled between floors. Anna was inside. When they pried open the doors, she wasn't injured. But she wouldn't speak again. Catatonic. Lucas never told anyone what really happened. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, the phone called again. Anna's mind is still alive. She walks in your future. But not with you. He screamed into the receiver. Who are you? Silence. Then, I'm you. But not yet. The call cut. He dropped the phone. Let it crash on the ground. But it didn't break. Just buzzed once, like it was laughing. Puzzle piece part 6. The number that dials you. Lucas tried to destroy the phone. First, he removed the battery. It turned itself back on. Then he tried smashing it with a hammer. It cracked, but the screen flickered once and displayed. Still here. Finally, he buried it in a park 10 miles away. But that night, he woke up to the familiar buzzing sound. The phone was back. On his nightstand. Still cracked. Still glowing. Anna, still catatonic, had been moved to a care facility. Lucas, now obsessed, isolated himself. He started tracking every event the phone predicted, building a spreadsheet. Each message followed a pattern, all pointing toward a future version of himself. One that was always trying to prevent something, but failing. And the messages started using phrases like, loop incomplete. Trying again. Memory fragment adjusted. This is iteration 4. Lucas realized with horror. He'd lived through this before. One night, the phone sent a location pin. It led him to an old payphone, broken and rusted, deep in the industrial zone of Porto Alegre. There, taped to the side, was an envelope with his name. Inside, a photograph. It was of Lucas, older, balding, scar on his cheek. The same number on the call that first night. +550000002039. The future wasn't calling. It was looping. Once, it mouthed the words. "The phone is the key," he answered. The voice was no longer robotic. It was clear. It said, "This is iteration 8. You failed again. But we've learned. The next you might get it right," Lucas said, trembling. "What do I do now?" the voice replied. "Sleep." His inbox was empty. He tried calling for help. Tried explaining to a neurologist. But the moment he said the word, "phone," the lights dimmed and his reflection grinned. Then the call came again. Same number. He didn't answer. It rang anyway. Lucas Andrade was never reported missing. His room is filled with notes, scribbles, recordings, all with one phrase. "The future doesn't want to change. It just wants you to know it won't." Some say if you find a black Motorola Razr in a flea market in South America, still powered, still working without a SIM, and it starts ringing at 2:33 a.m., don't answer. Because that call? It's not from someone else. It's from you. And the moment you pick up, your timeline becomes just another version. Another failure. Another Lucas. The staircase that ends in the sky. Most staircases take you somewhere. This one takes something from you. In the summer of 1987, a 31-year-old photographer named Erdinabadert Sarandurj was traveling across the Mongolian steppe on assignment from a state-run travel magazine. His goal: document remote nomadic cultures living in the highlands near the border with Russia. Erdin, as his friends called him, was quiet, meticulous, and deeply curious. His father had been a shaman, and although Erdin never followed the spiritual path, he carried a deep respect for the ancient beliefs of his people. That July, Erdin had reached the Kenai Mountains, a vast and mostly unexplored wilderness northeast of Ulaanbaatar. He was traveling by horseback with a local guide named Timulin, who'd grown up in the region and was fluent in both modern Mongolian and Old Tingria's traditions. It was during one of these excursions that they spotted something strange in the distance. At first, it looked like a thin white tower, far away on the plains. But as they approached, and the sun began to set, the object began to shimmer. It wasn't a tower. It was a staircase. Standing alone in the grass, with no support, no structure, just a rusted spiral staircase that rose up into the air and then ended. Temulin stopped his horse and muttered something under his breath. Erdin, confused, asked what he said. Temulin replied, "We should not look at it for too long. They don't like being seen." Erdin thought it was some kind of folk tale, a remnant of Tingria's superstition. But something about the way Temulin stared at the sky, it made Erdin hesitate. Still, he pulled out his Soviet-made Zenit camera and snapped 3 photographs. That night, while camping, Temulin refused to eat. He wouldn't speak. He just sat by the fire, eyes darting toward the horizon. At midnight, Erdin woke up to a sound, a soft, metallic creaking, like a chain swinging in the wind. He unzipped his tent. And in the distance, the staircase was glowing. When Erdin returned to Ulaanbaatar 2 weeks later, he rushed to the darkroom in the back of the editorial office. He was excited to develop the images from the expedition, especially the mysterious staircase. He carefully processed the negatives. All seemed normal, until he reached frame 21, the image of the staircase. At first glance, it looked exactly as he remembered, the rusty metal spiraling into empty air, surrounded by nothing but tall grass. But as the photograph sat in the tray, something strange happened. The staircase began to fade. First, the top vanished. Then the middle. Then the base. By the time it dried, the image showed only the grass, no staircase at all. He thought it was a chemical error, maybe a misfire from the flash. But the negatives were intact, and when he looked closely under a loupe, he saw something chilling. In the shadows near where the staircase had stood, there was a figure. Very faint. Barely visible. Tall. Thin. Head tilted. Looking directly at the camera. It hadn't been there when he took the shot. Erden rushed to Timulin's village, a small yurt community near the Kurlan River. But when he arrived, the camp was abandoned. Fresh ashes in the hearth. Half-packed belongings. But no people. A neighbor from a nearby camp told him. They left 2 nights ago. In silence. No one spoke. Just packed and left. All of them. When Erden asked why, the man pointed toward the north and said, He went too close to the sky stairs. That place remembers. Back in Ulaanbaatar, Erden tried to forget what he saw. But the photo wouldn't let him. Over the next 2 weeks, he developed 5 more rolls of unrelated images. In every one, no matter what the subject, the same figure began to appear. In windows. In backgrounds. Sometimes reflected in glass that wasn't in the original shot. It always looked the same. A tall, thin shadow. And it was always getting closer. Erden began to spiral. He stopped turning in assignments. Stopped answering calls from his editor. His tiny apartment became a darkroom. Photos and negatives everywhere. But one image haunted him the most. The figure in the frame. No matter how many times he enlarged it, zoomed in, redeveloped it, the face was always missing. A blank oval. Just skin. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. A smudge of nothing in the shape of a man. He showed it to a friend at the Ministry of Culture, a man named Dorj, who had once worked with Soviet photographic intelligence. Dorj stared at the photo, then looked at Erden and said, This isn't a photo error. It's a masking technique, but not one I recognize. Then he lowered his voice. There are old legends of the Tengir. Sky spirits. They walk unseen unless you see their path. If you saw the staircase, then you saw a place you weren't meant to. Erden tried to laugh it off, but his hands were shaking. He hadn't told anyone the worst part yet. Because it wasn't just the photos that were changing. His dreams had started bleeding into reality. He woke up screaming, sweating, only to find mud on the floor beneath his bed. The same rust-brown color of the step. And on his ankle, a perfect imprint of a staircase tread, like he'd stepped on it in real life. For the next week, Erden stayed inside, curtains drawn. Every time he looked up at the sky, even through a window, he felt watched. Not in the normal, paranoid sense. This was different. The sky itself felt alive, as if something had once burned there, or landed. He took new photos. But when developed, they showed not empty plains, but a village. One that didn't exist. With people staring at the camera. Their faces, blank ovals. Erden cross-referenced satellite maps, old Soviet topography files. No village ever existed there. Until he found one document, classified, barely legible, referencing a Project Tingri, and the phrase, Nonlinear elevation anomaly. Mobile. Temporal leakage likely. He didn't understand. Until he dreamed again. And saw himself climbing the staircase. Only this time, at the top, was the village. After the dream of the village, Erden woke up to a loud knocking on his apartment door. 3 sharp bangs. He froze. When the man reached the halfway point, he turned his head, but not his body. His face had no features, just pale, stretched skin. And then he spoke.